Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Som TV podcast. My name is Jason Wise. I want to thank you all for listening. Today, we are going to talk about something I've wanted to talk about for a long time. Winery dogs. Every single time we go and film at a winery, which has been, 15 or so years worth of work, every time a dog is there, it makes our day so much better, but we never really focus on them. So on today's podcast, my podcast producer and owner of Wild Sound Wine and a dog owner himself on the vineyard, John Adams, is going to join me, and we're going to go through some of our absolute favorite dogs that we have filmed with during the making of the Som films, everything with Som TV, and all of the great winery visits we've been to. So stay tuned for that. Before we talk about winery dogs, I want to remind you that SomTV.com has hundreds and hundreds of hours of original content, the best wine and food content you can find anywhere. For $49.99 for an entire year, you have access to everything, all the educational, entertaining stuff you can dream of in the wine space. Go to SomTV.com for all of that. And I want to wish you all a happy St. Patrick's Day. Remember, on Som TV, we've got the history of Guinness and some great stuff about St. Patrick's Day, including the history of that from a food and wine and beer standpoint. And I want to remind everybody that this whole episode is on Som TV visually right now, so you can watch this on Som TV as well. Without further ado, podcast producer John Adams, let's talk about dogs. I drank a little bit too much recently, and I got an idea that we would talk about winery dogs really quick. So, as people who watch Som TV know, we have a decade, 15 years worth of footage that we filmed all over the world. And we filmed with some incredible dogs on premises. It's one of my favorite things in the world when I walk in to a winery and they have a dog. I don't know why, but it's just one of those things that the minute I go to a winery and we're going to go film and I see a dog, I go, this is a place I want to be. And so the idea here is to kind of take a look at some of our favorite dogs in the content that we have and show those dogs, because normally they're not the focus. You know, you might get a shot of them, you might sort of see them for a second, but they're not the focus of what we're doing. But you have a vineyard, John, up in Oregon, in the Willamette.
Willamette Valley.
Yeah, and you have a dog. So I want to start this off with a really basically stupid question. Aren't dogs allergic to grapes? Like, doesn't that make them sick? Like, can I ask you a question of like why somebody would keep dogs at a vineyard?
Yeah, it's pretty weird. I mean, dogs are technically deathly allergic to grapes. I mean, I think if dogs eat grapes, even in tiny amounts, they can have full-on kidney failure. And I read a little bit about this because I have a dog, and they're not entirely sure what it is in the grapes that cause illness with the dog, but they think it is the tartaric acid in the grapes, which is like one of the most prevalent acids in grapes. That's like the main acid. So there's a lot of it.
Yeah, I know a dog that ate quite a bit of grapes one time. I know I've told you the story. And I know that they give dogs hydrogen peroxide sometimes so that they'll expel or puke up the grapes. This dog ate a gigantic basket of grapes from a harvest, and they gave the dog a full bottle of hydrogen peroxide, and it did nothing. The dog just looked right at them.
Whose dog was that?
I'm not going to name the winery because I just don't. But this dog, let's just say this was in Napa, okay? And this dog just looked at them and said, can I either have more grapes or more of that delicious hydrogen peroxide? It's just like, no problem. And the dog was fine. I think this dog is also known for eating things like screws and tin cans and like can eat whatever.
Yeah, you know, it's weird. Like some dogs it affects them, some dogs it's totally fine. Yeah. My dog ate an entire bag of vitamins out of my mother-in-law's purse on the floor one time. And we did the same thing. We gave him a little cup of hydrogen peroxide, but I mixed it with chicken broth. So the dog just inhaled it and immediately threw up. It was awesome. The whole bag, everything came up, no problem.
The dog ate the bag too? Like it's the whole bag?
Yeah, which is weird because Ollie's not he's not like a bag eater per se. He's not really like a guy who snoops around in bags, but for whatever reason, he just happened to get into these vitamins and he had to barf.
I would say bag eater is a great genre of dog. I just thought to start this off with, why would you keep a dog? It's like keeping a pet slug at a salt factory. It's just like it's just like a weird thing to do. But I love dogs. I think I'm always blown away with people from meeting people who don't like dogs. I think dogs are like one of the greatest things on earth, and they belong at vineyards. You've got all this space you have people coming and going, and dogs like nothing more than to say hi. So
For sure, dogs love people, people love dogs.
dogs love people, and people love dogs. So I want to ask, let's talk about your dog first, John. Your dog, Ollie.
Yep.
Why did you decide to get a dog on a vineyard? What's the purpose? What does a dog do at a vineyard?
My wife and I farm a small vineyard here in the Willamette Valley, and for a long time we lived in an apartment. We couldn't have a dog. We both love dogs. We both grew up with dogs. And when we moved here, we have acreage and land and space, so we wanted to get a dog as soon as we could. And with the vineyard, it just makes sense to have a dog around because they're A, great companions, but B, in our case, we have a ton of deer around here. And there's a huge difference when you have a dog and when you don't have a dog of the number of deer that are around your vineyard. I mean, the vineyard is fenced, but just the presence and the smell of the dog around keeps things away, which is a really nice peace of mind to have. And they're just great companions. I love this dog. He's amazing.
Yeah. So, but it's not just companionship. I think it's always interesting to think of dogs as like working dogs and dogs as like house dogs. Your dog's kind of maybe
He's like a combo dog.
1/4 working dog, 3/4 house dog. But yeah. One of the places I want to start is an actual working dog that will appear in a Behind the Glass that we have coming next month to Som TV, which is exciting. It's at Ross Knoll Vineyards, which is a very small boutique, very high-end winery in Sonoma. And they grow Pinot, they do white Pinot, they do Rosé, Diane Carpenter. But she hired a vineyard manager named Scott, and Scott brought this terrier. And so this terrier, as we know, terriers are kind of like ratters. And this is where I truly learned to appreciate the problems that vineyards have with gophers. And I know that you have had your own fair share of problems with gophers on your vineyard. We'll talk about that in a second. But I could not believe this terrier, who is the sweetest dog in the world, and then all of a sudden turned into a murderous, rampaging monster as it hunted down and ripped gophers out of the burrow.
Well, that's what we have Hugo for. He's busy.
Hugo's the dog.
Hugo's my dog, yeah. So he'll be working on the gophers while we're laying out the vineyard.
And so this guy, Scott, he was telling us that this animal, this terrier, can go through 13 gophers a day, eat them. And he eats the gophers. We're talking about
really?
Eats these gophers.
13?
Yeah, and I think
that's a baker's dozen.
13. So really quick, because I do know gophers are a serious problem in the vineyard, and dogs are something I had never thought of as a solution to this problem. What do gophers do in the vineyard?
Well, gophers are more of a problem in young vineyards, and Ross Knoll is a relatively newly planted. When was that planted? 2017, I think.
I think so. Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah. So when the vines are young, the root system is really small. And the gophers will get into the vineyard. And at least here in the Willamette, I don't know, I can't really speak to California, but I'm sure it's very similar. But the pocket gophers, these little guys, they will just go down the row to each vine, these baby vines, and they will eat the roots. And sometimes they will just take a whole chunk out of the trunk just below the surface. So they basically cut the base of the vine off. And in the summer, the vine just dies. You'll see a whole vine just wilted into nothing, just hanging there dead. And that's what the gophers do.
So they just eat that small part. It kills the whole vine. I mean, they're only after that little tiny thing. What a waste.
Yeah, because it cuts off the whole, cambium layer, all the circulation of nutrients and water up to the canopy. It's just gone. So plant just dies.
Well, so Scott brings his terrier with him, and I know for a fact he has talked about piles of gophers. It just gets right to work when he brings it to a vineyard, and it goes hole to hole to hole. And I think it does this pounce thing where it sort of chases the gopher to come out of a different hole. It runs there and then tricks the gopher to come back to the other spot. And it's got like a technique down and everything. I mean, these terriers, they are bred.
It's amazing how fast they are, too. Those terriers are so fast. I've seen them on YouTube videos going after rats in England. And these farmers will move these big piles of hay or straw, and there's just hundreds of rats underneath, and there's like a whole pack of terriers just goes after and destroys all these rats. It's pretty gross.
Just like one after another?
Yeah.
This is like just Saturday night viewing for you? This is great. I love this.
Well, because I got a thing with gophers because they destroy my vines. And I have an Australian Shepherd that does not eat gophers. So
Yeah.
maybe I should consider a terrier in the future.
I think so. I think a terrier's next in line. But I like the idea of a literal working vineyard dog that actually is preserving the vines. It's kind of like a protector of the vines in a weird way without knowing it.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
interesting. Interesting.
In Best in Show, what's that Eugene Levy quote? Was it like God loves a terrier or something? Doesn't he say that?
Mhm. He does. Yeah, that's right.
It's a great movie, by the way.
Yeah, great movie. Wish we had it on Sam TV. So then this takes us to the dogs that are there that don't perform an exact like this is your function type of a thing, but they're always sort of a big presence at the vineyard. And part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation was a friend of mine named Pete Stoltman over at Stoltman Vineyards, and you can see they have a behind the glass, and him and his wife do a blind tasting sessions on Sam TV. They had, and he recently passed, this gentle giant of a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Great Dane. And this is one of the sweetest animals. I mean, I have pictures of my little kids with this dog. Pete's kids used to climb all over him. Well, he just passed away. And Great Danes, they don't live the longest. Those bigger dogs don't live too long. But it was a very imposing, formidable thing. You pull up to the vineyard and you'd see an animal that's like as tall as your shoulders. And it turned out he was like the sweetest animal, and he just passed away. So
I think that's the thing with Great Danes. Like they're huge, but they're like gentle giants.
Hey, A-Speeds, you have a bag of meat? Yeah. Man, who doesn't?
Everyone's feeding him.
No, this is we did a big dinner party Saturday night.
Can you catch this?
Earl, buddy.
Shit, you saw the meat. Here, catch the meat.
Catch the meat.
Now you can get Earl's attention.
Yeah, well, I've only known a few in my life, and every single time I've known them, they're like, you can climb on them and they're fine. They're very sweet.
I think it's a really old breed of dog too. I think they've been breeding, originated, I think, in the Middle Ages or something. They've been around for a very long time, yeah. Yeah,
they're gorgeous, gorgeous dogs. But that dog recently passed away, and it made us think of all of the dogs that we've filmed with, throughout time. And Pete Stoltman's dog came up, but one of the ones that I've had the longest continuation of a relationship with was another dog that just recently passed away named Coda. And it was Steve Mathiasen and Jill Mathiasen's dog. It was one of these interesting dogs where you'd come on their property and the dog would be so friendly and they'd be like, don't touch him. You can't touch him. But he'd like rubbing up against you. And he sort of looked like, if you've seen Game of Thrones, he kind of looks like one of the wolves that the kids get in Game of Thrones. He's just imposing, large, very special breed of a German Shepherd.
Yeah.
He was, yeah. He was a very specific, I guess he's, very protective and he was very smart. And that dog sort of had 9 lives. I know that at one point he had a run-in with a car. He's had all sorts of things and always survived. But that dog was as important to my memory of the Mathiasen Vineyard as like the earthquake and their wines and the family aspect and the farming. I mean, that dog was like dead center of my relationship with Steve and Jill. And I think the first time we filmed with Coda was on around Psalm 1. And then Coda's in Psalm 2 for a cameo. And then, of course, all over the place for the Verticals episode on Mathiasen Winery. And that dog recently passed. And I think, anyone who owns a dog knows that when they move on, it's like losing a human. It's like losing a member of your family. It's really tough. And so, I talked to Steve when the dog passed away. Same with Pete Stoltman. I like messaged him. I'm so sorry. It's like you're losing a real person. Well,
I think we were there, didn't we? We filmed with Steve pretty recently after Coda passed, and he was. Steve was really torn up. Yeah,
he was really torn up.
Very sad.
They had a cat too. That talk about gophers. They had a cat that's in their blind tasting sessions. Beautiful calico cat, and that thing supposedly would eat whole gophers too. I don't know what it is. The
cat?
Gophers. They must be delicious gophers because
from what I gather, supersized mice. I think
that's right. So yeah, and they're pretty ugly looking, frankly. If you ask me,
for sure.
They live underground, so what do you expect? So. Moving down through the dog stuff, I just wanted to call out a few more different dogs that we filmed with. Back at the same place that we talked about this terrier at Ross Knoll Vineyards, there was a dog named Olive, who was
Olive by the Bay.
Olive by the Bay, that's right. A little corgi named Olive, very short little legs, and was one of the fastest little things, when it got running. But Olive can be seen in the Behind the Glass on Ross Knoll coming up. I think the episode is dedicated to Olive, who also passed recently. This is a sad theme we're going through. Another one, when we filmed at Lafitte Rothschild for the Verticals episode at Lafitte, there is a dog there. So even the greatest vineyards in the world, now this dog is very posh. You should see this dog. It does not look like, it looks like it has very soft hands. It has not worked hard. but
what kind of a dog is this?
It looked, that's a really good question. I mean, it was just like one of those dogs that looks pampered. I'm trying to think. Smaller,
big dog,
curly
small dog?
fur.
Small dog.
A small dog. Small dog. Yeah, it was
it's a good description.
It's not a very good dog description. But the last dog that's one of my absolute favorite dogs that we ever filmed with is linked to a person who I admire and love and miss very much, who is Stephen Spurrier. And obviously Stephen was in Psalm 3. Stephen is in Cup of Salvation, which is coming. Stephen is in the Judgment of Paris series that we have coming. Stephen is a larger-than-life presence in not just the wine world, but on Psalm TV and in an inspiration. Well, they had this lab. John, do you remember the Labrador Retriever?
I do, absolutely.
And property?
It was actually it was called a Borador, which is a combination of a lab and a border collie. And it was
really?
the sweetest dog. It was actually, when we filmed with Steven at his place, that dog was like such an inspiration for me to get a dog of my own, because that dog was the sweetest, most loving, caring, calm dog. I love that dog. It's great.
I will say, though, there was that one moment where Steven,
tried
we
to
were
run
walking
away.
down the path, and that dog took off, bolted, and we didn't find that dog until like 9 p.m. that night. We were staying at their house in Dorset, and the dog went missing.
Well, no dog, but she knows the village, so that's fine.
But, that Dorset, for people who are unfamiliar of where Stephen Spurrier planted his vines with his wife Bella and a winemaking team there, it is not where people plant vines normally. It's on the other side of England. It's on the west coast, southwest. And it is just a place where you're sort of battered by the ocean. You're right there up against the Atlantic. And I think that the temperatures and the humidity, and there's a lot of rain. But Stephen went ahead and planted Pinot and Chardonnay, and they make some tremendously good sparkling wine. And so this was a sparkling wine dog.
Great wines, for sure.
Yeah, very, very good wines. And Stephen is so missed. I know that he was miffed at me that I think it was my fault that the dog got loose that day.
Dog ran away.
Yeah, the dog. If you were gonna get another dog, what would you do?
My wife and I constantly talk about getting another dog, and I think that if I were to get another dog, I would get another Australian Shepherd, because I love them so much. Their temperament.
Does this have to do with the vineyard at all, or is this just
No, they're just great animals to have around. I've never had a dog before that is so much of a clinger, which I kind of like. I didn't know that I would like that, but this dog is always around you. If you're in the house, the dog is constantly by your side. It's always there, never leaves you. If you're out in the vineyard, he'll explore around, but he always stays in your general vicinity. And I don't know if that's because he's a herding breed, if he's like herding us or what, but I just love Australian Shepherds. They're great.
What other, just to close this out, you own a vineyard. What other breeds of dogs would make an ideal vineyard dog? I mean, I see for the most part, the dogs that vineyards have often are like, they came to them sort of thing. It's not like people went out and they're like, I'm looking for an Afghan dog. You know, it's like they just they get a dog, or they find a dog, or someone brings them one. But if you had to start from scratch and go, this is the best breed I could have for a winery, knowing that people come in, knowing that the dog's got to be behaved.
I think that dogs sell wine. Honestly, I think if you go to a tasting room, right? If you're in Napa, Sonoma, Willamette Valley, Santa Barbara, whatever, you go to a tasting room and they have a dog sitting there greeting you on the front step. It's just a great way to start your experience there. So I would probably keep it with some kind of a people-friendly dog, like a lab.
Yeah.
Border collie. Well, maybe border collie is a little too intense, but maybe an Australian Shepherd. I don't know. There's tons of dogs. I don't think you can really go wrong. What would you do?
Yeah. I'd probably do like 12 or 14 Chihuahuas. I just, instead of getting one big
good.
dog, I'd do a lot of little ones.
We didn't get it. There's
Probably.
no Chihuahua love on this on this
I
chat.
I can't say that I've ever, unless somebody's like carrying it in their purse at some like bougie Napa winery or something. I've never seen one at a
haven't either.
winery.
I never
don't
thought
see
that I
those.
would like little tiny dogs. I never liked little yippy dogs before. And then I rented a place one time and it was a guest house. And the owners of this house had a little Chihuahua dog. And this dog, I completely fell in love with this dog. Every time I was home, the dog would come and hang out with me. And poor Bailey, I miss her.
I love
great
all
dog.
dogs. Dogs are great.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Before we started this podcast off air, John was like, how the hell are we going to do a talk about dogs?
We're
just
gonna
going
talk
to
about
like dogs the whole time. And here we are. If you've made
20
it to the
minutes
end
later.
of this, you've listened to us talk about how we just like dogs. This is a good dog. That was a good dog.
And we hope you
John,
like
it's,
dogs too.
Yeah. And if you own a vineyard and you don't have a dog, remember what John said. Dogs sell wine. So
Yeah.
maybe you should consider that. All right, John. Good to talk, man. You got to get back to pruning, I bet.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Every once in a while, we got to do one for the dog lovers. And I'm amazed. Already, I've been hearing from people they want a Winery Cats episode. And so I'm not sure how that would work. But if anyone has any suggestions, you let me know. I'm all ears. If you love this podcast, please give us a great rating wherever you listen. Apple Pods, Spotify. It really, really helps. It means a lot to us. We work hard on these things. And go to SomTV.com. $49.99 for an entire year. Hundreds of hours and lots of great stuff coming up. We have a brand new Behind the Glass coming in just a couple weeks. It is a fantastic episode that shows the entire process over 8 years of filming of building a vineyard. And it's a great story. All right, everybody, please be safe. Be safe on St. Patrick's Day, too. Make sure you keep it down to about 12 Guinnesses or less before noon. That's the rule, okay? All right, behave.